All right, good evening. I would like to call to order the April 8th, 2021 Committee of the Whole for the Oak Park Forest High School Board. It is now 6:36 p.m. Gail, would you please call?
Mr. Kopsky?
Here.
Dr. Moore?
I don't think she can hear you. Yeah, you need to get your computer back on.
Here.
Mr. Isley?
Here.
Mr. March?
Here. I can barely hear you, Gail.
Ms. Harris? Here. And Ms. Dixon-Spivey?
Yeah. All right, thank you. So now we have the comments. Gail, are there public comments this evening? And do we have any wishes to make public comment or here in person? If so, please raise your hand. Gail, do you want to begin reading public comment, please?
This is from Katie Renner. Great news. Under the Phase 4 Restore Illinois plan, there are no capacity limits with either proof of full vaccination plus 14 days or a negative COVID-13 1 to 3 days prior. There are software systems being used to monitor this information. Could Oak Forest High School look into something like that as soon as possible? The guidelines state specifically businesses are responsible for managing their capacity and admission procedures within the venue to establish a protocol and system to verify proof of a vaccination plus 14 days or a negative COVID test. I've included the guidelines for reference and capacity. I realize the number of students in our school has been much of the barrier in following the state guidelines, but now that we are in Phase 4, there's room to get creative. While at this point, I am not suggesting a change to the remainder of the year's cohort plan, I am concerned with prom and graduation. We need leadership to be willing to be creative and support what many in the community want and what the class of 2021 deserves. There are parents willing to form a committee to help track and monitor vaccines or tests and provide that to the district if software is not an option. There are already hundreds of students vaccinated to date, and approximately 300 signed up for the April 12th appointments by a parent-led group who is assisting the community in securing appointments. I believe there is a student prom committee, but I am sure there are also parents who will be willing to help decorate. Prom is a voluntary event, and with a little work on the part of the school and the community, I think we can make it happen. Several districts are also getting creative, holding proms in football fields, parking lots, etc. Let's show our seniors what teamwork and creativity can accomplish. All we need is the district to approve. This is from Heidi Spilney. I'd like to show my support for trying to come up with an idea for a senior prom this year. Tent football field, something outside. Let's work on a solution for these kids that have been through so much in the last year. From Sandra Wolf, I certainly appreciate, I'm certainly happy to see that plans for graduation are being made. I'm curious to know what the survey result indicated and if those results are factored into the decision. On another note, I'm wondering why the survey results weren't shared with us and why the plan is being discussed tonight hasn't been shared before now. Prom is a big topic and there's been no mention of what is being considered. I've heard that a number of things have been proposed, but rejected, and the talk of moving the prom date. Many schools in our area have already determined plans for both prom and graduation, but we're still in planning mode. Given the lack of concrete plans, we will run into issues with not having enough time to do anything. And finally, is the high school doing anything to understand the vaccination rate among students so that can be factored into the planning? I feel strongly that both prom and graduation need to happen for these kids, and it's possible to do it safely. From Flo Schumacher, dear Board of Education members, I understand from the committee I understand members of the community are taking this opportunity to voice their views about senior prom. I would like to join them in encouraging the administration and this board to put forth their best efforts to provide a prom celebration of our seniors. A Facebook post motivated me to write this comment. The post was from a parent whose student was on the prom committee. The student was regretting her decision to be involved with the committee because she felt like the administration said no to every idea the students came up with. I'm worried that OPRF is developing a culture of no, a culture of can't. What message are we sending our students when their suggestions, their ideas, and their priorities are repeatedly rejected by the administration? With the upcoming increase in vaccine availability, the time to start a new chapter is now. Not the 21-22 school year, but now. I'm asking the administration to put an end to the culture of no and reject the culture of can't. Instead, let's fully support our students' efforts to end their senior year with the celebrations they so plainly deserve. The next one is from Katie Renner. In regard to the graduation proposal being discussed tonight, can the school please share the results of the survey, as the option that is being discussed was not one of the choices? I would like to thank you in advance if option 2 had the majority votes for figuring out how to only have 2 ceremonies instead of 5. But if option 1 had the majority, then I think we need to honor the voices of the students and community and let the kids be together in one shared ceremony. Thank you. I'm going to pass it.
I'm sorry, Gail, I don't have that. Kevin?
From Tracy Wasaki. Great news. Under the Phase 4 Restore Illinois plan, there are no capacity limits with either proof of full vaccination for 14 days or negative COVID test 1 to 3 days prior. Their software systems are being used to monitor this information. Could OPRFHS look into something like this ASAP? The guidelines state specifically businesses are responsible for managing their capacity and addition procedures within the venue to establish a protocol and system to verify proof of a vaccination for 14 days or negative COVID-19 test. I realize the number of students in our school has been much of a barrier in following the state guidelines, but now that we're in phase 4, there is room to be creative. While at this point, I am not suggesting a change to the remainder of the year's cohort plan, I am concerned with prom and graduation. We need leadership to be willing to be creative and support what many in the community want and what the class of 2021 deserves. There are parents willing to form a committee to help track and monitor vaccines or tests and provide that to the district if software is not an option. There are already hundreds of students vaccinated today and approximately 300 signed up for the April 12th appointment by parent-led groups who are assisting the community in securing appointments. I believe there is a student prom committee, but I'm sure there are also parents who are willing to help decorate. Prom is a voluntary event, and with a little work on the part of the school community, I think we can make it happen. Several districts are also getting creative, holding proms on football fields, parking lots, etc. Let's show our seniors what teamwork and creativity can accomplish. All we need is the district to improve. From Manette Donovan. I would like to know what the results were for the student parent survey as far as graduation formats. I am not certain why that information was not shared today. The school should always follow up with students and parents regarding any voting. Graduation is one of the most important days in a young person's life. Their vote counts as the parents' vote. No excuse for not sharing prior to this meeting. I would like to know what the results were for the student parent survey as far as the graduation format. I am not certain why that information was not shared to date. The school should always follow up with students and parents regarding any vote. Graduation is one of the most important days of a young person's life. Their votes count and the parents vote. No excuse for not sharing prior to this meeting. For Beth Siegel, prom and graduation can happen at higher capacities if you allow for some creativity and a little extra footwork. From the Illinois Governors.gov website, in an update to current phase 4 mitigation and the capacity limits of the bridge in phase 5, individuals with proof of full vaccination or a negative COVID-19 test, PCR, 1 to 3 days prior to the event or outing do not count against the capacity limit. The mitigation plan announced today also includes additional adjustments to current phase 4 mitigations made in coordination with business leaders and health experts to ensure mitigations reflect the latest science and are consistent across the industry. Illinois' rule, vaccinated people do not count towards the capacity of the space. If enough people voluntarily share their vaccination status before the event or provide a negative PCR test, you can increase the total in attendance at any given event. To the point of, would a vaccination be required to enter? No, absolutely not. Make it abundantly clear that by providing this information, the family is making it possible for more people to attend, but no student will be turned away from prom for failure to provide vaccination information. And the separate line item, you state that a negative PCR test will also allow for entry into the event. This is a little trickier since you won't know the number ahead of time, but you could sell a ticket the day before when the student brings the PCR results. Again, this allows for more participation, but not solely necessary. Finally, under the school is being told by the Oak Park Department of Health that the school cannot host prom. If this is the case, is there something stating that the school cannot provide communication, emails, etc.? If another group, such as the Booster Club, were to act as host and they were to find an alternative location, thinking a park district that isn't in Oak Park. Please start working with the students and think outside the box. Other schools have figured it out, while it appears that OPRF is still sitting back, willing to just accept anything as a no, because it's the easiest pathway. From Amy McIntosh, I am making a plea to the board for leadership. We elected you to this position to be our advocates and advocates for our children. Some say that it's difficult because of the pandemic, and with that I agree. But we put our trust in you to do difficult things. Now is the time to stand up and lead. I do not often claim that my kid or any other teenager deserve extra special things, but this is an extra special time, and so they do. These seniors deserve a prom, and they deserve the graduation they desire. Over 50% won ceremony. At this point in time, there is nothing that we as a community, under your leadership, cannot make happen safely. I beg of you, do what we elected you to do. Lead. Our students and our future leaders are watching. From Patty Carisso, as a parent of a senior, I would urge the board to vote on whichever version of graduation the senior class chose in the recent survey. These students have had so much taken from them this year, and I think the least we can do is honor their wishes and give them the graduation they want. Of course, I would love to be there to see my daughter graduate, but I want her to get what she wants far from anything else. If that means I'll watch it on the screen, that is a sacrifice I'm happy to make to let her graduate with her friends. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? No? Anyone present who wishes to make public comment? Great, thank you. And next, this evening, we have approval of the minutes. I move to approve the March 11, 2021 committee of the whole meeting minutes. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great,
Thank you.
thank you. And now we have
Instructions. The first item on the agenda is the freshman curriculum update for the history division. Making this presentation tonight is Ms. Amy Hill, District Division Head, Dr. Lloyd Fiorenza, Director of Student Learning, and Mr. Greg Johnson, Associate Superintendent. As referenced in last semester's updates on curriculum, we're providing further information about our freshman curriculum work throughout the spring semester. This is an update from the history division. This item falls under Strategic Plan Priority 2, Transformative Education and District Policy 6:40. Ms. Hill?
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt Adams.
Good evening. I'm very happy to be here tonight to share an update with you about the curriculum restructuring project and world history. I'd like to start by recognizing and thanking the members of the curriculum team, some of whom are present either virtually or in the room, who have been hard at work over the past 2 years, whose efforts are producing an exciting world history curriculum for all students, and who were essential partners with me in putting this presentation together. The team members are Ishla Arceo-Witzel, Tony Biasello, Linda Burns, Matt Maloney, Dan Woolman, and Bill Young. Our work has been focused on these 4 goals that are specific to the world history curriculum. These goals are not siloed, there's overlap among them. And I'll speak to some of the ways the goals are intertwined as I go through them in more detail. I invite you to consider other connections that may occur to you. And I want to note that Goal 5 is set apart because while it applies to the world history curriculum, it also applies to our other required courses in U.S. history. Among the 16 members I named earlier, we have wide representation from the history and elective courses. We've also built in feedback loops and opportunities for input from the larger world history and world studies group of teachers, as well as from the full history division at various points along the way. Our work began in the spring semester of 2019 when we reviewed data, student grades, course pathways, the results of student surveys and focus groups to generate priorities for the following year. Last year and this year, we have focused on a backward design process, incorporating the strengths of our existing world history and world studies programs, learning about models of tracking, and conducting limited action research. Because both of these action research efforts were limited in terms of the number of students and teachers involved, we're not drawing hard and fast conclusions from them, but we have made some observations about what is working well to engage students, as well as ways to support and challenge students across a range of readiness. Our backward design process started with the big picture. What do we want students to know, understand, and be able to do upon the completion of the course? In answering that question, we identified new course standards that identify the priority skills for teaching and learning, enduring understandings, which are the big ideas we want students to take away from the course, and essential questions. These are open-ended, thought-provoking questions that require one to provide support and justification in response. These elements provide a common structure and focus for the course, and they are central to meeting Goal 1. The standards we selected for this course are from the College Board. They are advanced placement historical thinking skills. What might not be evident at a glance is that in addition to historical thinking, these skills feature a strong focus on writing skills and analytical reading, which have always been important in the world history curriculum. Aligning to these standards is one way that we are working to meet Goal 1, and it is also central to Goal 2. Preparing more students to access AP courses in our division. This is particularly important in preparing more students to take advanced placement U.S. history in their sophomore year, just months after they complete world history. Enduring understandings help to anchor the course with big ideas that we will return to repeatedly over the course of the year. These examples reflect themes that help students connect their learning from one unit to the next. They also reflect our deliberate work related to Goal 1 to create a curriculum that is culturally responsive and that explores challenging aspects of history rather than papering over them. Enduring understandings are also an example of how Goal 3 overlaps with Goal 1. When we make the challenges of history and historiography visible, we create safe spaces for students to explore and we support their social and emotional well-being. I want to note that the third example on this slide is one that we adapted from the Southern Poverty Law Center's anti-bias standards. The remaining slides are going to take a closer look at the specific ways we are working to achieve each of the 4 goals. I spoke earlier about essential questions as part of our backward design process, and framing the curriculum with these questions is also central to Goal 1. These essential questions don't have simple right and wrong answers, as I'm sure you can see. Many of them invite other questions. Students are asked to sift and weigh evidence in determining their position, and in doing this, they're also developing their voice. One of the ways the course will encourage students to develop their voice is to frame history as an argument, not as a set of facts. For some of us, this framing of history may be unfamiliar. We may recall our own experience of history education as one that presented history as a set of incontrovertible facts, significant events that occurred in the past, and the important people in my history education, they were mostly men, who made those events happen. Very likely we learned a Eurocentric version of world history. But developments in the discipline of world history have changed the way we teach the course. Now we teach that historians use available evidence from primary and secondary sources and often interpret the past rather than merely reporting it. In doing so, historians are subject to personal and cultural biases, and often the evidence that they rely on is also subject to biases and to power imbalances. There's an African proverb that captures this dynamic. To quote Nigerian writer Chinua Achebe, until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Featuring counter narratives along with dominant narratives rather than a single story is another way we create culturally responsive, safe spaces for our students. And students themselves are asked to construct arguments in response to debatable historical questions using historical evidence. Again, in doing this, they're developing their own voice. Providing students options for what will be the focus of an assessment and how they will demonstrate their understanding is another way we are working to meet the first goal. These are examples of assessments that provide voice and choice, although it's important to note that we're still developing the specifics of the curriculum, including assessments. The state of Illinois recently published a set of culturally responsive teaching and learning standards. From them, we have developed a self-assessment that we're going to use to build and review the units of the restructured course. We'll use the assessment proactively so that we're striving to meet the standards as we are structuring units, developing and refining assessments, selecting materials, and creating daily activities. We'll use a simple rating scale to assess the relative strength of our work in light of the specific practices and link those ratings to specific examples within the curriculum. We'll identify areas for improvement and monitor the impact of our efforts in part by soliciting student input and feedback. Being culturally responsive will help us create a sense of belonging for students that will enhance their social emotional well-being. Over the past 5 to 10 years, our curriculum has shifted away from a Eurocentric narrative to a global narrative, and the restructured course will feature that same global focus, including the examples you see here. This shift represents a deliberate move to cultural responsiveness. You can see that in the descriptors how much more representative the global narrative is. And as such, it gives more students the opportunity to find themselves in the curriculum. This dual timeline of the Middle Ages is one that was created by one of my teachers, I'm very proud to say, and it contrasts the Eurocentric narrative on the bottom half with the global narrative on the top half. And as with the last slide, you can see how much more representative and inclusive the global narrative is. Decentering Europe does not mean eliminating Europe from the narrative. It means positioning Europe among the regions of the world whose history matters in understanding the modern day, providing essential context for understanding how the world got to be the way it is. In teaching the origins of systems of oppression and examples of resistance, agency, and empowerment, including the examples here, we help students learn that systems of oppression are not natural. They are constructed by humans, and as such, they can be deconstructed. We don't have to accept them, we can act against them, we can resist and exert agency. And history provides many examples of successful resistance and empowerment. I've already spoken to how we are meeting goal 2, teaching students the skills that are essential to success in advanced placement and honors courses. The restructured course will be taught at an honors level with supports and intentional instruction for students across a range of readiness. These examples of supports demonstrate how we will meet students where they are and how we will provide challenges so that all students can grow. I've included an excerpt from a rubric that we use to encourage students to master challenging skills. I joked with Mr. Johnson and Dr. Fiorenza earlier that when the students reach proficiency, the cheerleader pops out of the rubric. But in reality, of course, the teachers themselves play the role of cheerleader. Students self-assess their level of proficiency, and we help them to use the rubric to identify what to do next. Our fourth goal helps us to align our teaching and learning of key reading and writing skills with our English counterparts. And in doing so, we're developing common rubrics for writing and common instructional practices in reading. We have a number of steps outlined for the near future, including developing the details of our course units and common assessments, reviewing traditional textbooks as well as online resources that provide the same reading at 5 different reading levels, so that we can challenge kids at whatever level they are at, and we have to actually develop a draft writing with our grade 9 English counterparts. We're very excited about this course that we're developing. Thank you very much for having me to share it with you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for that. Board members, questions?
I don't have any questions, Sarah, but I just had a comment.
Yes, please.
First, I wanted to just say thank you. I appreciate that you took what the state has put forward as far as culturally relevant pedagogy and inclusion and really incorporated that into what we see and what you presented to us tonight. That's critical for students to have an understanding of themselves in his historical framework, not that it be decentered, right? That it's actually accurate history. So I appreciate that piece. I do have a question. It just occurred to me. So you talked about the scaffolds, some of the scaffolding pieces that would be in place. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I find that our community is not as aware of what that might look like and how that increases rigor. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more about what that would look like.
Sure. So I think the best example, but an example that is top of mind for me has to do with how readings can be differentiated so that a text that students might struggle with becomes more accessible. So there are any number of ways to do that. One that we use frequently is called stop, think, write, where a text is chunked in such a way that it provides sort of a consumable amount of information in any one chunk, and then there's a question that follows, whereas perhaps the margins of the text that students are asked to respond to in the middle of a reading assignment, so that they're processing in a very direct way what it is that they're reading, and then at the end, typically asked to synthesize something that they've read. So a text that we use in world history on the question of imperialism and industrialization, might have kids, might break down the connections, various connections between those two ideas, so that, again, it's a little bit more digestible, but also it's the whole text present for students to wrestle with. So it's not watering anything down, it's really just making it more accessible for all students.
So much for that. Can I ask one more question, Sarah?
Yes, of course.
So I'm curious about ethnic studies, specifically as a course. My daughter always asks me, like, how come I can take honors history of U.S. history, but there's no honors history for any other indigenous cultures or anywhere else? And so I'm curious a little bit about that and its placement, and if there may be courses already that I'm just not aware of on ethnic studies, or so anything you could shed light on in that area would be greatly appreciated.
So let me just clarify, specifically, are you asking about what courses are available for ethnic studies, or whether about honors credit attached to those experiences?
A little bit of both.
Okay,
That would be great, thank you.
Sure. So we teach African history, African American history, modern Middle Eastern history, Asian studies, Latin American history. Those would be the specifics within my I think those are the ethnic studies classes. None of them. Modern Middle Eastern history does have an honors course. None of the others are. All I can say is it's sort of what I inherited. It's been that way for a long time. There has not been a discussion specifically about making any of those honors classes, but I did explore and ran into some dual credit paths that seemed promising, but then ended up not.
Okay, and
Thank you.
board members, Ralph,
Sarah, I had a question.
Jackie.
Hi, thank you all for the presentation. It's twofold. One has to do with, I am agreeing with Gina and how we present what we mean by scaffolding and supports, because just all the conversations we've had with the community, as well as the dog whistle terminology that is related to watered down or less rigor or things like that. I really hope that we can even strengthen that understanding, as well as our language around it, where it is, accessible and supports equating the same way that we have students whose parents hire tutors for them, or who are the students that are at the tutoring center every day. So we're talking about accessibility in a way, and access to resources that the narrative in our community shies away from or does not understand. I'm not quite sure what balance there is there, but really struggles with understanding that if in an AP class, the number of times that I've seen, help, my child needs a tutor, that's a support. So normalizing that, that need across the board, whether it's privately, individualized tutoring, or it's something that we're able to bring for some of our students in the class, that conversation has to get to our parents. And then the other piece has to do with the question that Gina's daughter, and I can name, off the top of my head, over the last 10, 12 years, a variety of students that have asked that about honors level ethnic studies courses. And I'm hoping that we get to a place where, and like soon, because we're restructuring our curriculum, where it's not what was inherited, but what we can do because we know it's right. And I would, our students have been asking for that. And even the presentation begs for that when it says that we're decentering white European culture. But we have to show that we're really doing that by having our honors level courses reflect that as well. So not sure what that means in the near term, but it would certainly be helpful to see that is being planned, and there's a date set for when it can happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Other board members?
Sure.
Tom?
Yeah, I have a quick question and an ask. The question is, you mentioned it, and Gina referenced it, the state's cultural standards. Is that something that each state is doing their own thing, or how does it work beyond the scope of Illinois?
I can't speak to what's happening beyond the state of Illinois, but our state governs education that happens in Illinois, obviously. So to the extent that the state board cares about the content that students have and the practices of educators, that's where that came from. They're pretty comprehensive. They cover their standards for us as professionals, and there is a bunch that relate to curriculum. There are other that relate to sort of classroom interactions and that sort of dynamic. But that's what I can tell you about at this point.
Okay. My second one is, again, it's what I think they've talked about. I know the focus of this is the freshman curriculum, but it would be helpful to understand, the full, what's changing to the full curriculum in terms of the rigor of additional courses that will be available. So that would just kind of help paint the bigger picture as it is.
Yeah, there is a timeline that is sort of district-wide in terms of, for curriculum review, and those electives in theory would be in the fourth year of the review. I don't know that there's anything that would prevent us from doing it earlier.
Thank you.
Others, Craig or Bill for that? Thank you so much, Amy. That was wonderful. Very well done.
Next item is the graduation 2021 update. Making this presentation is Ms. Susan Johnson, Director of Student Activities, Greg Johnson, Associate Superintendent. They will go through various components of our proposal, as well as mitigation. This item is in compliance with strategic plan priority 1, racial equity, 2, transformative education, and priority 4, operations, facilities, and finance. Ms. Johnson and Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second to share the screen. Okay, so thank you all for having us here to talk about the graduation ceremony coming up. I want to just say before we get anything started that, of course, making sure that we provide a high quality in-person graduation ceremony has been a top priority of us in our school for quite some time now. And so what we want to do right now is talk about the process that we've used to get us to that point, the way that we've kind of factored in the voice, guidelines from various stakeholders, and why we've come to the decision that we've come to at this point in the game, and how we have opened the door for flexibility as might be needed, depending on what might happen, change in the next 8 weeks or so. So with that said, we're going to start by talking about the ceremony a little bit, and I'm going to turn this over to Susan to talk about, or not the ceremony yet, to talk about the committee she worked with, and I'll turn it over to Susan to talk about.
Excuse me, Greg, should we be seeing, is there something that we should be seeing? Because all I'm seeing is the agenda right now.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. There's, I have some survey results up here that I'm going to be sharing in just a second, Gina. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll leave it with the cover for that right now. Thank you for that catch. So Susan.
Good evening. So we started a graduation committee this year. The graduation committee is made up of some graduating seniors parents, as well as myself, Julie Toretta, our head school nurse, Tony Higgins, our lead custodian, David Waxler, our director of campus safety, Janelle Bishop, our lead dean.
Ms. Johnson, could you speak just a little louder, your voice is really low.
It's low.
Could you speak just a little louder? Your voice is trailing off.
Okay, so we started a graduation committee this year. I led the committee, and we've had several students that are graduating this year on the committee, as well as several parents of graduating seniors. And then in addition, we have Julie Toretta, who's our head school nurse. We have Tony Higgins, who's our lead custodian, David Waxler, our director of campus safety, Janelle Bishop, our lead dean, Dr. Kennedy Dixon, our director of special ed, Sherilyn McLeod, who's our trauma and informed school interventionist, and she's a parent of a graduating senior. So this committee has met a few times now. We started by talking about what some of our possibilities are for this year, what some of the restrictions are, and what the goal is to make sure that we have a ceremony that's as close to our traditional graduation ceremony as possible, while staying within the mitigations that are outlined by the Illinois Department of Public Health under the Restore Illinois plan. I've also been working with our contact at the Oak Park Public Health Department on a regular basis, probably weekly. And we've been going through the changing mitigations and what our restrictions are within that. And so the plan that we've come up with is something that we feel can work in not only in phase 4, which is the phase we're in right now, but then could be modified to work as well in our bridge phase and phase 5. if we reach those. I think Greg is going to talk about our survey data right now.
Okay, thanks, Susan. So we did a survey back in early March about what parents and students would like to see with the graduation. We'll talk about those results and how we kind of understand these results a little bit as a first phase in kind of helping to guide our decision. So first, here's the information that we got from our parents. 512 respondents. Keep in mind, we have roughly, as a kind of a benchmark, about 900 seniors. Okay, so hold on to that number. We have 512 respondents. And you can see here that there is no real majority in the response. There's no real consensus from the community. But you do see very clearly that 1 out of every 2 parents would prefer 4 to 5 ceremonies. That was the best information that we had at the time. Under the guidance at the early part of March when this went out, remember, we didn't have the new Restore Illinois guidance out. So we were saying we didn't see a way to do, smaller than 4 or 5 ceremonies. We were thinking at that point like PSS teams. That's no longer on the table. That was in our mindset at that point. We have the 4 to 5 ceremony here with 50% of the parents. But you also have 36% who say 1 ceremony, and then about the remaining 15% or whatever that is who would like to see something other than that. So let's take a look at our students and see what they have to say. Well, if you compare the parents' community to student survey, only about 32%, a third of the students agreed with the parents and said that they would like 4 to 5 multiple ceremonies. 47% of the students said that they would like 1 ceremony, however. So what we also have here is a bit of a consensus emerging from students, but not a simple majority. We don't have a majority of the students who say they want 1 ceremony. And we do have, 20-some% who are saying that they would like something alternative to that. Well, so we had kind of a split in this data. I think it's fair to say in looking at this that parents generally favored multiple ceremonies. Of course, parents want to do that. And students generally would lean towards 1 ceremony so they can be with all their peers. So we have a split bit of data. So let's dig a little bit further and see what we can understand from the survey results. So we segregated this by race a little bit to get a feel for exactly who was filling out the survey, all right? What did we get? As you can see here, on the bottom right here, you can see the percentage of populations who filled out the survey. And it is skewed more towards certainly. It's not a demographic population. I'll simply say that. Fewer Black and brown students in comparison to our overpopulation filled it out. Our white population. And so, what does this tell us? Let's take a look at the Black and brown population of the school. It's pretty evenly split between 1 ceremony and 4 or 5 ceremonies. White students very clearly are saying, a little bit more than the majority, 51.9% say, hey, we would like to see 1 ceremony. Again, it doesn't force any conclusion for us at all, but it helps us to consider that we should understand this data with a little bit of a nuance here. What is it truly telling us? So we have a split data. We don't quite know if we should go with 1 ceremony or 2 ceremonies. The next bit of data came out to us to help guide our decision making, and that was from the Restore Illinois plan. It came out March 8th. It told us that we could expand access to outdoor activities. That was about the time that we started to roll out our sports seasons. It's about the time we started to increase capacity to our outdoor events. And what you saw there was that at that point, outdoor events were about 20% of normal capacity. It was the guidelines for schools for what they could house. Then a little bit later, March 18th, not too long ago, an additional bit of information came out from the state of Illinois with the Restore Illinois plan, specific to what's called Bridge to Phase 5, which is the idea that we have the current Phase 4, a little bridge, which is the halfway space between that, and then Phase 5, which is fully opening up. That document is not geared specifically for public schools. So when we're talking about curricular and extracurricular events, we really need to be focusing on the original guidelines of 20%. However, in talking with Oak Park Public Health regarding a prom activity, which is a ticket event, which spectators, we got the guidance there that it was okay to go with the 25% guidance. And that for us was the game changer. We kind of have split survey data, not fully representative of our school population as a whole. We have the shifting guidance, 20%, now 25%. And we're looking to ourselves and saying, okay, here we can kind of find this kind of reasoned middle ground from the guidance and the stakeholders that we're getting. What does that tell us? Well, let's not do the 4 to 5, we can do better. We only did one ceremony. That would, at best, it would put the situation in our families of saying, look, and kids, make a hard decision. We could only have in that situation perhaps one parent who would be able to attend the graduation ceremony. I think I jumped over, so my apologies. Let me back up before I get there. You have, with this guidance that we have with 25% capacity, about 4,000 beaches, 25% of which per half of our graduates. Half of our graduates is 450. They each bring 2. That would bring 900 parents into our beaches, or 1 parent per our graduates. So how do we decide which way to go with this? And the decision was really, to not force families to make that hard choice. So I'm going to take this parent or this parent. For that would be a hard choice for any family to make. Certainly a hard choice for some families and others. And so we took a look at all the data and we made a determination to focus on the option that we did for two ceremonies of half our graduates, allowing 900 spectators on stage. So that really opened the door to the path that we've taken for what this ceremony actually looks like. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan to talk about the ceremony itself within this kind of 2 ceremony. Susan, go ahead.
So for our ceremony, there's several different elements that we have for each typical graduation ceremony. One of the things that we can add to this year's ceremony is that by having 2 ceremonies, we'll be having 2 sets of speakers. So normally we have a student that does a welcome speech, we have a student that does a response, we have different speaking roles, and we're actually going to be able to double that this year, so more students have speaking roles at graduation. In addition, our Scholarship Cup students, they're going to be seated amongst their peers this year because of the size of the stage, and we can't fit 31 students fully on the stage and keep our distance. So they'll be seated amongst their peers, but they'll still be honored in every other way that we have always honored them. And then additionally, we've also added the ability for our students to walk across the stage this year. So we've added ramps to both sides of the stage, and they're going to be able to walk up on the stage, receive their diploma, and then back down the stage. That's going to help people in the audience be able to see them better. That's going to help students get more of a graduation walking across the stage feel. And then in addition, we're going to be adding in screens on either side of the stage so that people will be able to see a zoomed in view of students receiving their diploma. Finally, we're also going to add in a recess. So we're going to recess our students out of the stadium this year to help keep social distancing at the end of the ceremony. And what we're going to do is have our 2 ceremonies on the exact same day. They're just going to be kind of back to each other. So because of mitigations and because of how indoor versus outdoor works, we don't have the option to be able to do a graduation ceremony inside as a backup for our rain date like we normally do. We can't do that unless we're in phase 5. And so what we've decided to do is hopefully move graduation to the Saturday, the day before graduation, and then use our Sunday as our backup rain date. So we have 2 opportunities for us to have outdoor ceremonies instead of 1. Likely our ceremonies would start 3 hours apart from each other. So whether they start at 2 and 5 or 3 and 6, we're still working that final detail out, but we'll be able to graduate everybody on the same day and hopefully have everything outside and our students still feel all of the same elements that we normally have in a graduation, just a little bit smaller.
The last thing that I'll mention, Susan, is regarding what's next, really. If we find, of course, that the guidance changes, that we move to phase 5, for example, or that under phase 5, what we can do with our students regarding vaccinations, for example, is open, then of course we can make other paths. But as of right now, the guidance that we have from schools is pretty clear. for our own students, what we can do with our students and vaccinations. And that is that it can be a mitigating factor when we're talking about quarantining students. So if I have my vaccination, I have my vax card, and I've been in contact or close contact with somebody who's positive and I am asymptomatic, I do not have to quarantine. But that is the only mitigation that is relieved from us and regarding our own students relative to vaccinations. That's all we can do at this point. And so if that door opens up for us, that could change our approach. But for right now, we're at a point where we are, the weeks away we are from graduation. We need to get word out to the community about what we're talking about. And that's why we have this here. So if there's, again, something significant changes, we can do that. But for right now, this is where we're at. So if there are questions, we will open it up to the board. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Questions from board members?
I have one, Sarah.
Yes, Jackie.
I can't see if someone else wanted to go, that's fine.
Oh, go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Greg, the question I have is, what's the last day that changes could be made, even if, things were to open up more? Because at some point, say it's 2 days before, does that mean that 2 days before there'd be a scramble to have one ceremony as opposed to two? I think that kind of clarity would be helpful for all parties.
That is a great question, Dr. Moore. I don't have a concrete answer for you. You're right that if something changes, 2 to 3 days before, it's going to be really hard to pivot. Whereas if things change 3 weeks before, much more reasonable to do. You're thinking about tickets and safety protocols. So I guess the quickest answer to your question is I don't have a concrete one for you right now, a concrete answer. But as we communicate this out, we're planning on sending the communication out tomorrow if we can to our students and our parents. We could perhaps put something in there, but a little bit further down the road, give that specific. A specific challenge for us with this is, it's not just, the things have changed and we can pivot. We also have to get our plan for how we are going to move folks in and out of the stadium, of course, approved by Oak Park. So there's a little bit of the stuff in there that they've been very quick with, but it still is a step that we have to take. We need to get that communication out, so we'll look for a date, okay?
I think that just to really slow down folks in terms of thinking that there's no, that there is a hard and fast date, it just would be helpful to have something that is not arbitrary, but can be explained.
Thank you, Jackie. Tom?
Yeah, I have 3 questions. Fire away. The first is, it was mentioned about the members of the committee. Were there any students on the committee?
Yes, there's several students on the committee. I think about 6 or 7, at least.
My second question is, in a 2-ceremony event, how will the students be split?
They'll be divided by counselor. So our graduation traditionally is broken up by counselor. And so we're going to continue with that. 7 counselors will be in one ceremony and 8 will be in the other.
And my last question is, did we consider any alternative venues? I know that this discussion was to be as quote unquote traditional, but in prior years we looked at UIC as an example. I guess have we looked at any venues that could accommodate a single graduation?
We did not. We presume that this event would be here within our football stadium. I guess partly because what we're speaking to there, at least in that example, which isn't going, that's an indoor facility, right? But no, we didn't.
I have a question, if I may.
Yes, Matt.
So I heard something about the recessional and exiting the students out. And I'm wondering, would that be something that's, it's like just a little more detail. That one of the things that I've noticed is how much enjoyment students and families can have of having some opportunities on the field for a little bit. And so that's something that I think folks might want to retain. I don't know, but maybe it'd be like, you know, dimming the lights, so to speak, and ushering them off at some reasonable time if we have enough separation between them. I just want to get clarity. Would that be lost under this plan?
It is, and it's not just under this plan. If we have this outside on the football stadium, we are seeing, or anywhere, regardless of where we are outside, 6 foot distance between everybody is still there. And we've gotten some very reasonable questions, right? Well, wait a second, you're moving your classroom spaces, which can be 3 feet, but outside the guidance is 6 foot. That's what we have. And so if we were to change the recessional, so the recessional is designed to maintain that social distance, okay, as kids move out. So whatever we do, if we do something a little bit non-traditional with the recessional, that could be cool. We could consider that for sure. It would still have to satisfy that criteria in order to make it through the approval process.
Just a thought, is the softball and baseball field that's, you know, adjacent right up here, maybe a way to usher them out, but I'm just, in terms of just the hundreds of students still that this would involve and family, you know, traffic and all that. So anyway, I'm just offering that as one possible way to accommodate that. And then obviously the second of the two.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So I know that Mr. Johnson mentioned social distancing. The other thing with 2 ceremonies, there's a limited time capacity to get one ceremony done, things cleaned up and disinfected, and another ceremony starting. And so if we allow families to do photo ops and congregate on the field, that impacts that time. Right. And the village has actually said to us, because that's the day we're asking to have it, is also when they have more warning. So there's a lot of implications with parking. We have to get warning people out on Scoville and Elmwood and so forth. And then if there's a ceremony, people are going to be parking, you got to get them out. So it's just a lot of other logistical things that come into play also without being allowing people to congregate on the fields and celebrate.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, the second group would maybe have an advantage because there's not a third event plus the hub. So just an observation that may or may not be helpful. And number 39, berating you, Greg, is well, first actually I like the idea of Saturday with the Sunday rain date. And I think that's something that maybe is a good idea in general to in the future. And I also realized that it's a lot of logistical maneuvering with the farmers market to consider. And also in future years, there could be uncertainty, right? Of grandparents know this coming in, not only today, but you know, they are back-to-back days, so we can make it work. So and I thought, yeah, Jackie asked the question that was on my mind mostly too, is okay, things have been changing all the time. So that would be helpful to convey whatever date we can and you know, be open to pivoting as we've been doing. So thank you.
And I should clarify the exact start time. If we have a Saturday. So it's not completely separate because you mentioned the farmers market. So we're trying to figure out 2:30, 3 o'clock, or what we can really realistically do. We'll have it nailed down shortly.
Questions from other board members? No questions. I assume that masking will still be a requirement. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. All other mitigations.
So in terms of, you know, we do photos as students get their diplomas, et cetera, all of that, speeches, everything, students will still have to wear masks, correct?
Yes. During the ceremony, there's no.
Yeah, I want our community to understand that too, just so they're not disappointed.
Yeah, I understand that.
Photos will look different.
Yeah, I know Susan is working on class of 21 masks for students.
Yeah.
But no matter how you dress it up, it's still a mask.
Yeah. Thank you. Questions from anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you for this. It's very thoughtful.
Now we move to the finance section of the meeting. And the next item is 21-22 food service intergovernmental agreement with District 97. Making this presentation is Ms. Mike Wazowski. Mr. William Pankowski, who is our Director of Food Service. At the conclusion of her presentation, we are asking to move this recommendation forward for approval of the 1-year extension to the intergovernmental agreement between Oak Park and Forest High School and District 97 for the provision of freshly prepared meals for the 21-22 school year, be approved at the April 22nd, 2021 Board of Education meeting. This item is in compliance with strategic plan priority 4, operations, facilities, and finance, and district policy 1:20. Mr. Kowski.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening. We have been the vendor for District 97 for the past 14 years, delivering their breakfast and lunch meals. So we are asking for a 1-year extension. We are holding the pricing 1 more year firm. So we're asking the Committee of the Whole to recommend the 1-year extension of the intergovernmental agreement to the Board of Education for approval at the April 22nd, 2021 meeting. So does anyone have any questions?
Questions by any board members? You spoke to this a little bit, but why are we looking at just a 1-year extension? Is that just solely due to the pricing?
Yes, yeah, I wanted to go more, but District 97 wouldn't unless I held the price for 3 years, and I haven't raised the price in the last 5 years, so I don't know what the future will hold, especially with COVID. So I said I couldn't hold the price for 3 more years, reevaluate next year, and then we'll go forward.
Got it. So that's not any reflection on our relationship.
Oh, no. No, they just wanted me to hold the price for 3 more years, and I didn't feel it was, correct for the benefit of both districts. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The next item is the letter of agreement with the Historical Society of Oak Park. Bringing this presentation forward is Karen Sullivan, Executive Director of Communications. At the conclusion, this item is in compliance with strategic plan priority 4, operations, facilities, and finance, and it is in compliance with district policy 8:10. So,
hello, everyone. So as you may or may not know, we have a lot of archives here on site. Park Forest High School is coming up on 150 years old. So there's a lot of memorabilia and trophies and photos and all sorts of things. And in 1978, class of 78, designated it an archive space in the building. And Don Vogel, who many of you may know, retired faculty members, took a great deal of care and effort to organize these archives. So for many years they were organized. After Don retired in 2010, the archives really unfortunately fell into disarray. Currently, there were just piles of memorabilia in a closet in the in-school credit recovery room. And that area is going to be under construction next summer as part of Project One. So this discussion has actually been happening for a while about which we do archives. It would be great if we could have it organized, if we could have it accessible to the public. We do frequently get calls, especially about when somebody's writing a book about Ernest Hemingway or something historical. We just don't have a way to, they're not organized. We don't know how to lay our hands into pieces of information or historical documents. So, the project took on urgency with the fact that area is getting under construction. And we just don't have a place for them, nor do we really have the expertise or the bandwidth to stay on top of keeping these organized and creating exhibits, various themed exhibits that can really highlight our history and share it with the public. So I've been in conversation with the Historical Society. Frank Lebo is here tonight, the Executive Director. Don Vogel and John Stelzer has also been part of the discussion. There's a lot of sports memorabilia and historical artifacts that we have. So we would like to transfer the archives to the Historical Society's ownership. We do that transfer over this summer when the building's empty, and have all those transferred by September. And then we would have Dr. Adams, the superintendent, would establish an archives committee to continually review what's in the archives, what's being added to the archives, to plan a couple of exhibits a year. We have a display case here prominently located where we can have ongoing and frequently rotating displays to really make use of all this memorabilia and artifacts that we have. You know, we have a really rich history here, and it will be great to have it organized and able to share with the public. So the cost attached to this is a $5,000 annual cost. That's below the $25,000 threshold required, which requires board approval. So that, I think, is about everything I have to share with you.
I do want to add that we did have our legal counsel look at the file.
I'm sorry.
We had legal counsel look at the agreement.
Yes, yes.
Ready for questions? Questions from board members?
I have a few.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
First comment is I think it's a great idea, and I appreciate the Historical Society's willingness to do this. So the first question I have is the ongoing nature of history, that today's news is tomorrow's archives. And so I'm not sure that it's really, is there some contemplation of how to do this knowingly? I understand there's a whole deluge you're going to be giving them, but if you could talk about if there is a set plan of action.
I think that will be part of what we work out as the committee, and it's definitely a topic we've discussed, that we're making history every year, especially during this pandemic year, right? And it's something that I also want to put out to the faculty and staff as you're cleaning out your offices in preparation for construction and whatnot. Here's the sort of things we're looking for. Please bring them to me. So yes, absolutely, we definitely have an eye on observing on an ongoing basis various things.
Good. But in the $5,000 figure, I'm just curious where that came from, and I'm not questioning it, as I'm wondering if it might need to go up over time. I understand, you know, they've got space constraint themselves, so I just think it's a terrific idea, because I know that just accessing information anywhere is so much of the importance of it, right? It's just tucked away to expend, it's no good. So I just want to maybe suggest that maybe there's some kind of revisiting of that. But is there I don't need the math to show you math now, but it's just mentioning it in that regard that I feel like it's huge value, and I do like the idea of rotating displays in so that it can create this kind of impetus to have people to go there and check it out and read the process. So I think it's really a wonderful thing. And I don't know if there's any other high schools and their respective historical societies that do we learn from any other relationships like this before, best practices?
I don't have that experience. I don't know, Frank, if that's something that you are aware of.
Yeah, I think the idea is, oh, sure, of course.
You can come on.
Thank you, Dr. Adams, and board members. Yes, I think our historical society, those of you who are less familiar, we moved from Pleasant Home over to Oak Park River Forest Museum, our new facility at the corner of Lake Street and Lombard Avenue. And one of the things that we've done, I think other similar organizations do, is try to find ways to work with the community, all facets of the community, and try to tell a lot of different stories. And before this, like through the years, we become a repository of organizational records from the League of Women Voters, the Oak Park Lesbian and Gay Association, the Rotary Club, the 19th Century Club, just a bunch of organizations. And we didn't do a survey of other historical society high school relationships, but it's quite common to see some historical memorabilia from high schools or other schools in local history collections. And it was a really interesting discussion earlier about the freshman world history curriculum changes. As was being said, good history is layered history, is a lot of different facets to it, is not focusing just on any one sort of part of the community's history. But we all know that Oak Park River Forest High School is sort of a central institution for the 2 villages we serve. So I think it's a great opportunity as people research their homes and want to know about other people in genealogical sense and family history sense. A lot of that history passes through the high school at certain levels. So that's kind of part of why we're so excited about this and grateful for the opportunity to work with you all the time.
Great, I love the building over there, and you do all great work. And the one thing I'll say is with the expansion or the making a more robust website for the high school, that's going to be ongoing. I know they're willing to do that, to really think about how to incorporate this into that and to help direct people there and display things on the website as well. Because as we know, the website can store more stuff, better or for worse. So
Pick up on that, the idea of an exhibit case or like changing exhibits, it really should be reflected through your social media and other sort of channels. I think that's really important. The other part of that is what this committee so far, the sort of preliminary committee kind of talking about some of these issues. There's been a lot of discussion about making sure, as I said a few minutes ago, that today's history and the class of 2030's history is not sort of like the high school history ended at this point, right? It's got to be this ongoing thing. And there is a sense that perhaps there's not enough of a record retention. Obviously, legal records, things are kept, by the high school, but that's not the issue. But we haven't thought to gather some of these electronic records or perhaps some other things that over time could help tell some of these stories. So by this sort of this sort of agreement, we'll have a chance over time to adjust that and see what the needs are 3 years and 5 years and 10 years down the road.
thank you. That's all I have. I appreciate your indulging all my queries.
Questions from other board members? Craig?
Sorry for this question. I should know the answer to it, but Historical Society, how is it organized? Is it a 501c3?
Yes, we're a 501c3 organization organized in 68, chartered by Illinois in 1970. And we're supported by memberships, grants, fundraising initiatives of various sorts, etc.
Okay, thank you. I guess something was said, I just want to make sure I understood it. So the words that were used were the memorabilia will be transferred over to. Is it legally transferred over to, or is the care of it being transferred over to? I mean, do we as a high school still retain control of it? Or are we ceding that over to the historical society?
Well, what we have said in the letter of agreement
Yeah.
is that we would be transferring ownership to the historical society, but there would be ongoing oversight through the archives community. That would be based here in the high school.
So I guess over time, if we weren't happy with the way it was being done, we don't really have a lot of recourse.
No,
Yeah.
Craig, if I could jump in, what the letter agreement says is items transferred to the Historical Society will become part of its collection to be cared for and made accessible for blah, blah, blah. Transferred items will not be disposed of by the Historical Society without the written consent of the District 200 superintendent. So they can't dispose of it without the superintendent's consent. There's a typo in that paragraph, by the way. But we have no right to do anything. I mean, it doesn't say like a right of first, they can't sell it. They can't otherwise transfer it, giving us some sort of right of refusal to get it back, first right of refusal. None of that stuff exists. It just says they can't be disposed of by the Historical Society without the written consent of our superintendent.
I'm just sort of doing my due diligence to make sure that we are good proper care and control over that as the high school. Thank you.
Questions from other board members? On Zoom, if they want to just jump in. Okay, so
I'm sorry, Sarah,
yes, Jackie.
sorry, it's so hard to see, so I'm still not quite clear between what Ralph and Craig and Karen said, transferring over the ownership. It's not like on loan or that they're being housed there, but that they are actually become the property of the Historical Society.
Yes.
Is that So the things that Ralph brought up about the letter stating that they can't be destroyed, it does not cover other aspects. Not that I'm suggesting that that could, I know under the current leadership of the Historical Society, I can't even imagine that even being a thought. But as we think about moving forward, is the language in the letter strong enough to ensure that there is that right of refusal?
We can certainly go back and add that, if that's something that the board desires.
Well, it's a question. I'm not sure. It's Jackie's question. I'm not sure how other board members feel, but that's the part that the transfer language, you know, I just would like a little more clarity on what making sure everyone understands, including our alums or teachers who receive things, or, you know, everybody that who knows what's in that closet.
A lot of stuff.
We can actually go back and look at that language and make it more clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just adding a right of first refusal would be in the district's interest.
Okay.
That was the only thing I caught in that. And to Matt's question, the only question I have about the $5,000 a year is it seems like a very arbitrary number. Then there'd certainly be more costs associated with the Historical Society trying to catalog this stuff and put it together in the first year than the second, third, or fourth. So I do kind of want to know where that number came from.
And I actually told Frank what the board would want to know, so that is something I think he's prepared to answer.
This transfer phase, this year, one of the things that we were counting on is Don Vogel's participation and working closely with Karen and others in terms of not being entirely on our staff time. And then after that, we were trying to be reasonable and just did some basic math with a salary of our archivist and or some staff time, that we're not viewing this as a profit center, but as some fees for services over time. And I think the idea of even that 5-year period is let's look at it together after 5 years, and we'll be keeping track of the hours we spend, et cetera. As I said earlier, a lot of these things are intertwined. Of course, somebody's doing family history, but they want to pull out the old yearbooks or whatever. So we're going to be tracking how we're accessing these materials. So it's something that then I think over time, we'll have more of that data in terms of, well, you know, we're really going to be spending closer to $8,000 a year, you know, that kind of thing. So yes.
Or closer to $3,000 a year.
Yeah, possibly.
Other questions?
Yeah, I guess the only other contract modification I'd want in this, it's not really a question, is there's sort of an agreement to agree at the very end of it that after 2025, we'll try to agree and have a new contract. If we don't agree to a new contract, I think we just got to make it clear the right of first refusal on disposition of former OPF property survives the termination of the agreement.
And so I have some questions along those lines as well, that jumped out to me when I was reading this. So I think this is a great idea, and I think it makes a ton of sense. And knowing Frank, I have every faith that this will be a great experience for all of us. What makes me a little apprehensive is, you know, our donors have given us these items in expectation that they would be property of OPRF in perpetuity, right? And now we're sort of ceding not just custody, but ownership of those items. And so one question that I would have is whether any of those bequests, whatever they might have been, if any of them had specific legal language in them that would prohibit such a transfer. I don't know that they would, and I would guess not, but I think it's something that we should probably investigate, especially for items that might be more valuable, to see if there's any sort of rules around how we can transfer those items. It was really the transfer of ownership versus the transfer of custody that makes me that's the only part about this that makes me a little squeamish, because if the Historical Society ceases to be, for example, you know, I'm assuming that there's liability insurance, I'm assuming that there's all sorts of fire protections, but none of that is really in this document. You know, and these are things that our families and our community members us over generations, which, you know, dear meaning certainly to them, also to us. So Would like to see a little bit of detail in here to better understand how to be cared for, like archival, storage, you know, all the things. I don't know the word. But just to make sure that these items are treated with the same reverence. I know they're in the closet right now, right? So I'm not trying to say there's no reverence. I get it. We're gonna be better than we've been, right? That's without a doubt. But I would like to see a little bit more in here about what that exactly means for us. And you know, the right of first refusal is great, but that only comes into play if it's being sold, right? So I would actually like to see even more language around this that kind of allows us to claw back items if we see fit, or if we have a donor who's upset about it and wants to display it in the high school permanently or whatever, so we have a little more flexibility.
We're certainly open to some revised language. One of the things that we wanted to avoid from the beginning is sort of just being the storage facility down the street and yet having to ensure and care for and maintain the idea that we have that more fuller partnership. And there's things mentioned in the document that talk about our collection policy, which talks about the care and treatment of items, et cetera. So they'll be governed by those same standards, but we can certainly work on some more language as appropriate.
And would this is not a question to be answered now, but if we paid more of an annual fee, would you be willing to safeguard the items, archive them, care for them, but have the district retain ownership? I don't know, and I'm not, again, not for tonight, but I think that might be a different solution, especially if we have alums or donors that are not comfortable with this for whatever reason.
We can talk more about that and see what there's other options.
Yes?
Sarah,
Yes.
I would tell you, there are no current donor agreements in existence. Everything that we have in the archives, people were happy to get out of their grandma's basement or their house or whatever. So currently there are no written agreements with any donors for any of the materials that are in our archives. The only written agreement that the high school has that I'm aware of in terms of ownership is we have there's a set of Frank Lloyd Wright publication drawings that we have on permanent loan to the Frank Lloyd Wright home and studio.
Thank you for that clarification.
And that's the language I was searching for, permanent loan. That's the part that resonates in terms of collections being housed at museums and things like that. So that's an option.
We'll work on that language and we'll come back.
And I really appreciate your willingness to take this on. And I think it's high time that we give these items the attention they deserve and make them accessible to all.
Thank you.
So thank you. And thank you, Mr. Vogel, for your dedication throughout the years. Clearly, you're very missed. So thank you for that.
That was what I was going to add. Don Vogel and Tom Stelzer have collaborated with us and spent an enormous amount of time talking us through. So we really appreciate their efforts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. The next item is proposed Board of Education budget for fiscal year 22. Coming forth with presentations, the Cindy Story, Chief Financial Officer. The next steps after this would be to review the board's budget for the 22 year and make changes, and if necessary, and then in order to bring this forward for approval at the April 22nd Board of Education meeting. This item is in compliance with strategic plan priorities for operations, facilities, and finance, and district policy for Poland 10.
Thank you, Dr. Florida.
But you share your screen. Was it your plan to show the budget?
Yeah.
So looking at the budget over last year, there's a 20% increase over last year's spend. That's approximately $74,000, a little bit more than that. But that is a big bulk of this is due to the fact of the video recordings of the board meetings and also the hardware. That's about $60,000. That's what's making that up.
I couldn't hear. I heard the video, I didn't understand.
Okay. So you have about $60,000 that's from the video recordings of the board meetings and also to the hardware for the video recordings. You have about 10,000 for professional development, and then there was also about 5,000 for board communications. So that makes up about the $75,000 increase over last year. So with that, I'm going to open up to the board to discuss and let me know if they would like any changes.
Questions or comments? Tom?
Yeah, I have two questions. I mean, the two big items that jump out are legal fees and then the video equipment. So question for each. On the video equipment, will that be used solely for the board? Are there any synergies there that with other governing bodies or somewhere else we can leverage those assets? Who else is going to use them? Or are they going to be used once a month like a football stadium?
I can speak to the flexibility of the technology. We looked at some solutions that fix it to the boardroom. And what we're trying to do is find something that is more flexible. So something that's similar to what we're using right now, but a little more streamlined, efficient, easier to use, easier for our end users to use, and flexible in terms of where it can be placed. So we're looking for an audiovisual streaming solution that we can plop into any area. And what that means is that we could move the board meeting wherever we want, but we could also use it for other events in the school. So it wouldn't be tied strictly to board use. This is something where it can be used in other places where we need something similar to what we're doing here, but in a flexible physical arrangement. So that's our goal, and that's what we think we can do with money that's in that budget.
Is part of the money also under the videography, the actual videotaping?
Correct. Yeah. So somebody to do what our gentleman over there behind the curtain are doing for us right now, making sure the right cameras are on, live streaming is going, and so forth. There's a line in the budget for that as well.
Thank you. So, and the other was just legal fees, so it's more of a seat. I mean, with being the single largest expense, we had a meeting and we were talking about web design, and we bring that in-house, yet here we have this kind of money. So have we talked, has there been any dialogue about in-housing that? Awesome.
Yes. So in a nutshell, Tom, I have had some very preliminary conversations about what it might look like to bring legal counsel in-house. There's a host of issues with that, right? Both cost savings potentially, but also it becomes complicated. Who supervises that person? Like how does that person's performance assessed, et cetera. But I am hopeful that perhaps even, and this is breaking news, so please don't hold me to this. I've not talked to anybody in any other districts, but I'm thinking that perhaps we could work with our feeder districts to maybe see if there's some synergies there around better managing our legal fees through having general counsel essentially that is paid through the district directly, not law firms. So it is a thought. It is a nascent thought. It is an embryo. So we'll see.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Sure.
I think I asked a question about, was there any coordination with any other taxing body or group on this? And I don't think that question was answered. On the equipment.
Yeah, we do have a tri-district agreement on technology. I don't know what the needs are specifically for the other two districts in this arena. We were looking for something that was more of a fixed body within this district, but we could definitely look into that and see if there's some cross purposes where this could be shared between the three. Obviously, when we do tri-district meetings and so forth, But we can look into it. We've got an agreement with the other two districts for technology, so we can see if we can work.
I do want to add a level of caution. When you consistently transfer equipment between, there's the potential of conflict when the equipment is needed. There's the potential of damage to the equipment. I just want to make sure that when we are looking, that those are also things that we look at.
I understand that, but I'm not sure that every solution is about having your own equipment and your own these days. It might be a little bit more about recording, dropping to the cloud and storing in place. I just think it'd be worth a phone call and talk to our other tax guys about their challenges here.
Yeah, we have
I think
regular.
we know that before we spend $50,000.
Honestly, they're looking at something very similar, but because you're going to end up in situations where you're both needing it at similar times and so forth, plus exactly what Dr. Pruitt Adams was mentioning in terms of transfer, you're going to run into that. So it's a give and take. They're looking at the same challenges. I know it.
I know we did look at, when we first started talking about corning. One of the requests the board was that if we talk with the village, there were some complications.
Yeah, we did investigate that. We took some trips over to the village, talked with them. They have a traditional TV studio set up, complete with full-time staff that runs that TV studio. And so it's a pretty involved system, and not something that's easily transferred.
Last question. Is this meeting space recorded?
I'm not sure I understand.
Are we, I thought we have been for quite a while essentially recording our meetings, and they've been able to be replayed by people in the public since the beginning of the pandemic. So what's the new solution for versus what we're doing now?
The connections with that recording and live stream, as you can hear with my mic. So we would like something. We would like something a little more dependable. And so that's why.
So we have the capability to do this now. It's just done as dependable.
It's
like
like yeah.
Okay.
Strung us together as best we can.
Any other questions about the board budget?
Yeah, I just, my whole feeling is it's a lot of money for something that we could already do now. And I get they want to have a system that's more reliable or whatever, but I don't know at this time in this environment, whether that's a wise expenditure to make. I just don't know if it is. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Comments to Ralph's comments?
So I would just go back to just to clarify, Chris, you mentioned earlier about the flexibility of being able to go to different places on our property or maybe even off campus if there's something not right. Is that correct? That to me seems very compelling because there's so many things happening within the building and outside the building that it can be great to capture, whether it's a sports team that's downstate because, you know, and have someone, I'm just imagining, but to me, that's a huge element too. It's not just these meetings, it's and I think one of the things that I appreciate is we've made some real strides, especially in the last couple of years, towards external communications to the community. But I feel like we've only begun potential of what we'll be tapping into. And so, so I just think you could speak to that because you touched on a bunch of the examples, but I feel like there's so many things going on, clubs and activities and programs that are sensational, and I'd love to see so much more content created, even if it's only for a small number of students and the families that see, hey, here's a special moment in that classroom, in that club. So I'll stop and see you can expand on what that could represent.
Sure. I mean, if there's one thing that we learned during the pandemic, it's what access a digital window can provide. And this provides the district with an additional digital window that they can use in a variety of situations, including boardrooms, to increase transparency into both the way that we operate here and also some of the wonderful things that we're doing here. What, you know, honestly, what we're looking for, I've found in a static solution that fits in a room. And that's, you know, what we based our pricing on from that research. The development right now is in technology that can move with the user. And so we're looking for that middle ground between something that allows for something like this that's a more formal sit-down situation, multiple people involved. Everybody needs to be heard, everybody needs to be seen, and yet not have it fixed to a boardroom where you're forced into that to a physical location. That is the end goal. And so we're looking for solutions that could then put into a situation where you're trying to highlight something and extend that to a wider audience so they know about the wonderful things we're doing here. Be able to plop it in that location, stream away, and now you're running. But really what we've got here is a cobbled together solution based on a series of different technologies, a series of different vendors. We'd like to consolidate that into something more of a cohesive package.
I guess my other comment would be, you know, we're paying a set amount for this technology to really think through as an organization how to make the most use of it as possible, right? Get the biggest ROI possible. I understand Ralph's question, concern, and I think part of it is to show the value from it so that it's not confined to just whatever number of hours we need. So that's all I would contribute.
And Matt, I appreciate all those comments. And you know, Chris, I appreciate everything you're bringing to the table. The bottom line is we as a board voted not to take our full extension. We as a board voted to have our administration find $1.7 million in cuts in their budget. And we as a board are going to approve a $60,000 expenditure for something that would be nice to have that we don't need to have. I don't think that's very consistent. And I'm a no vote on that if it stays in the budget, because I think we are being inconsistent when we're not taking our full levy, not taking our full extension. We're asking our administration to cut $1.7 million, and then we're going to increase our board budget for a thing that we would like to have that we don't need to have.
Well said, Ralph. Thank you. My comment would be relevant to that is that this is a board budget, and all of this discussion about, and we use it for students, et cetera, is not part of the board budget. So, I mean, I think we're focusing on the specifics of the board budget. My questioning and what Craig re-asked was, as a board, what we spend our, you know, for the board budget, the guidance is we need to be sharing and looking at, you know, other taxing bodies and how we can be frugal with our money to meet the needs and do our work. So, but if we're talking about this being expenditures that's for student activities, it's not part of it.
So I just need some clarification. So I think the initial reason this was trying to the board's budget was because of the board's desire to record these meetings and us wanting to do it in a more efficient, quality manner. The fact remains, even if we stay with this equipment, there's a cost for the videographer in these meetings. And so my question to the board is, do you want us to go back to, this is the board's budget, you're absolutely correct, and revisit that amount and, you know, like take the equipment piece out, but leave into consideration the number of board meetings and things that have to be recorded. That's similar to the professional development that's for the board and the communication training that's for the board.
So can I ask a question before we answer that question? So Chris, next year, God willing, we'll be back in the boardroom, and things will look more like they did probably last year. Well, over a year ago. So given that, right, assuming that that's the case, can we not go back to how we had been doing it pre-pandemic? Because we were recording even before the pandemic, right? Before we had to go virtual. Frankly, going virtual, you're totally virtual, probably made it easier. So what happens when we're just sort of back in the boardroom?
That's what I was referring to. We keep the same equipment, but we still had to, even pre-pandemic, we were paying someone to record. And that person was being paid to edit, to upload on YouTube and so forth. That's what I'm saying would remain.
Right. But that is a cost for the 2019, 2020 budget as well.
Right. But before we put it in kind of spread out across the budget. This first year, because it was not built into the budget, it was I won't say an afterthought. It came up after the budget had been approved. And so we pulled monies from different places to pay for it.
So to understand, you're saying that even without the equipment, we'll still have an associated cost, but
We would still have some associated costs, even without the equipment.
So can I ask a question about Village Hall again? And I know this isn't like super popular, because it's not on district property, but if we wanted to have our board meetings televised, the village board has their meetings on Mondays. We've never had a Monday meeting that I know of. Have we looked into whether that would be an opportunity for us to do maybe one meeting a month to cut down on some of those? I don't know what those costs, maybe more, I don't know. But have we ever had those conversations? Because it is made for this exact thing.
I know that we had some initial conversations. We didn't get to the point where we were talking about agreements. I think it will be fraught with some difficulties.
And it might, right? But I'm just curious because that is a setup that would be very convenient for the community since they're used to village board meetings being done. So, Tom, I believe is a no on that line item, correct? As it stands now, right? I'm just doing a straw poll.
I'm supportive as you heard, but I understand this. But yeah, in binary, I'll say yes.
Jackie?
I'm a yes.
Gina?
I'm a yes too. Yeah, my question actually was going to be around how do we, how much is it costing us to do it now? And how much, what's the cost differential between what we already have set up and what this is going to bring us? But I'm still a yes for this.
We could probably get to you for the next meeting approximate cost, but I know when we first started, we looked at the number of board meetings, the number of town meetings, special board meetings, regular board meetings, board town halls, any special events that the board had. And that's what we calculated, but that was the first year. And so if we look at the first year and this year, which I think has been an increase, particularly, I'm not sure if the special meetings the board has had with the superintendent search have been added to that as well. And we could possibly come up with some approximate costs, but this year is so different from last year, it would not possibly be an accurate accounting of what it would cost.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we are leveraging licensing that is included within the fact that we're in a pandemic, but we could break that out based on what that might look like.
I think I'm a no as well. So.
I have a question of Cindy, Mr. Gore. I know right now we're scheduled for the board to approve their budget at the meeting on the 22nd. But that then gets filtered into the overall budget. Is there an opportunity if we right now take the videography piece out and then, go with what we would have without that, and then come back with the data that the board has asked for with regards to possible amounts, and then amend their budget.
Yes, because we actually, the preliminary comes in June. So there's not a problem with it. This is actually the first time anyone's discussing their budget, so there's not a problem. But I want to clarify one thing too. The only thing we're really looking for here is to remove the cost of the hardware, correct? Not the personnel that we've been paying to actually video record videos.
That's an understanding, yes.
Okay, I just wanted, because I'll remove it from there. I just wanted to make sure I didn't take out too much.
I'll be clear, I think video.
Yeah, that's not what we're trying to communicate at all, right? We want to keep doing it. We just want to do it in the most cost effective way we can.
If I may ask, is the federal money that's come to schools over time, would any of that, any of these line items, would they help fund any of these this coming year? You know,
I don't think so.
Just
This is a choice we made, it's not
Where
really.
they
a
allocate it.
response.
I think they're more on loss reforming and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we'd have a hard time justifying to the Fed spending $50,000 on video recording for board meeting with federal relief money for COVID. I'm thinking that wouldn't fly.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I was thinking the holiday tea.
Our next item is the Trident College Evening School Agreement. This presentation is being made by Mr. Greg Johnson, Associate Superintendent, and Ron Anderson. Oh, that is really wrong. I'm sorry. It says Ron Anderson, Executive Director of Equity. That is really wrong. That should be Ron Anderson. Ron, so Ron's name should not be on here at all.
Well, it is a facilities issue. And so, but this is an ongoing agreement that we have on a 2-year rotating basis throughout college. It's been a very successful partnership over the past several years. And it is a common agreement that is with all the school districts. So not much by way of presentation on this, but we plan to bring this to the board for approval at the regular meeting.
Thank you. Board members, questions? Presenters, questions? Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is with Ron Anderson. And it is the summer 2021 FF&E purchase. It's an item for discussion. And at the conclusion, we would ask to then bring this discussion item back for approval on the 22nd of April at the regular board meeting. It is in compliance with strategic plan for operations, facilities, and finance and district policy 2:140 and 2:220. Mr. Anderson.
Good evening, board. Being that we're short, we're early on time, but like extended time. So the district budgeted over a little bit over $2 million for the FF&E, the purchase fixtures and equipment for the project one. And the expenses are already approved. These are not additional expenses to the budget, as we spoke about on December 3rd and previous board meetings. This will provide the furniture for the summer 2021 renovations only. The items that's on the list that's attached. Floor space and FGM led the design process for this for these items, and we went through the national purchase agreement cooperative of Sourcewell. During this process, we had involved all the department chairs, teachers were involved. Everywhere the furniture was going into different spaces, all of those people were involved with the selection, what they needed. They had input on the process to make sure that we were getting exactly what they wanted and what they needed. So the total for the purchase is $437,423 $1,200,000.49. This is the first phase of 4 phases of purchases. So we got the 2021, summer 2021 phase. We have the second phase, which will be December for the SRC. And then we have the summer 22 and the summer 23 phase. And as you can see at the 1.8 million, we're a little bit under budget, and this is an estimated budget because we will have some things that need to be added at later dates, such as some technical equipment, not just minor things, not anything that's going to take us over budget or close to the budget that we planned for. It's just certain things that we need to add that wasn't part of the regular budget that we had to purchase, such as some green medium boards and that type of thing. We also have Susan from Workspace online, and she can run you through, if you want, through the actual images of the areas and the items that we have. Susan, are you there?
I'm here. Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening. There we go. Everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share. Can someone confirm that everyone else can see this?
Cannot see it.
It says that you started screen sharing, but it's nothing there.
Okay, is everyone able to see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through phase 1 furniture, which will be the purchases for the summer of 2021. Let's see here. Here's the first floor layout. So anything that has been highlighted in purple are the items that will be purchased for this summer. And these are just an overview of the overall floor. We'll go into more zoomed in areas here in a couple slides. Second floor, third floor, and then fourth floor. So starting on the first floor, here's the visitors waiting area. First floor security workstations. More security workstations. These are actually inside of an office. The attendance workstations. This is the second view of the attendance workstations. The special education reception waiting area. This is view 1. Here's the secondary view. Here's the special education filing room. This is the standard private office, the first private office. Here's a director private office. Here's the IEP conference rooms. Here's the STAR classroom layout. Here's the site classroom layout on the first floor. This is going to be the student commons area on the first floor. This is the second floor corridor that has more student commons areas. And then this is the balcony classroom on the second floor that will also be used as student common areas. Going on to the third floor, here's the digital arts room. Here's the second digital art room. Here's the digital art critique room. And here is the fourth floor teacher office workroom. Here is the standard classroom layout in a lecture mode. And here is a secondary view of that classroom in a group mode. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to go back to any of the slides for additional viewing.
I have a question. Sarah, I don't know if you, can you go back one slide, Susan?
Yes.
Do all of the furniture, does it go up and down? Like I'm noticing, looks like the ones on the left side of the image there raise up.
Correct. So we actually account for 8 height adjustable workstations in a classroom. They are a simple sit to stand in the sense that they can go down to a standard seating height for test taking when purposes need to be all at the same height, but then they have the ability to raise up for the purposes of standing.
Thank you. I just know that for a lot of our students, they do need the ability to be able to stand. They're actually function better when they're standing versus seated. So I'm appreciative of those pieces of how the furniture is adaptable.
Other questions?
And those desktops are also whiteboard tops, so you can actually write on the desk.
Yeah, so that was actually a very predominant driving topic of conversation across most departments, is that they really do utilize the marker board tops. So these have been standardized in all of the classrooms.
Susan, maybe also share with the board about the teacher stations, some features about the different things about some of the furniture that was chosen within the classrooms, et cetera. We are showing casters, et cetera.
Yeah, so one of the primary drivers with changes throughout the classrooms was the idea to create more mobility, both in height variances and then in the ability to go from a lecture mode to a group mode to a Socratic seminar mode, or any kind of setting that a teacher may need. Current workstations didn't allow for that, and this now will allow every teacher to kind of get and move to the classroom that they need and easily have students reconfigure within a couple of minutes. All student desks and chairs are now on casters. The teachers now have a sit to stand podium along with a stool. The sit to stand podium will allow a teacher to now pull up to students at a desk height and be able to sit down and have a conversation with them rather than feeling like they're being talked above or at. And then additionally, we added some mobile storage. The mobile storage, depending on department, they chose whether they wanted a more bookcase or a tote type application, which will allow for their individual storage needs. It will also allow for occasional group breakout where they can divide up spaces by allocating and moving these storage pieces in between. The back of these storage spaces also have marker boards on them. So now at a seated height, students will be able to collaborate and have a piece to bring up to the desk and have conversations and notes on the back of those items.
Tom, did you have a question?
Yeah, Ron, my question is this: the high level estimate, you kind of started with 2,048,000, and then you have it in phases. Is the scope of those two the same? I mean, we have for project one, we still have numerous classrooms that have not yet formally been, put in project one, correct?
Oh, they're all in.
So the scope of the furniture is including all the classrooms and all the project one scope.
Yes.
Questions? Okay.
What will happen to the existing furniture? Excuse me? What will happen to the existing furniture?
So we joined, it's called public surplus. So the existing furniture will go on a public surplus auction site for 30 days. And we will auction off all of the existing furniture to make sure that we create revenue for district for the furniture that we are getting rid of. So throwing it away.
I guess the second follow-up question to that, was there any evaluation of existing furniture that was relatively new that could have been reused, or is this just a total replacement?
Well, we are reusing some furniture. Some furniture can't. Susan, I think Susan evaluated the furniture and the pieces that we could use. She recommended that we keep. Am I right, Susan?
Yeah, so there are some cases where there's specialized pieces, especially in special ed, that we identified based on the current budget and based on the evaluation of their how recent the purchases were, that they would be utilized and incorporated into some of their spaces. Otherwise, a lot of it was also driven by creating a new standard for classrooms. If you currently walk through the building, there's a lot of different variation, and we wanted to create a standardization so then as teachers move from space to space, they know the equipment that they're going to walk into. And now students have an understanding of the expectation in the classroom of what kind of furniture and how easy it's going to be for them to use going forward.
So just so I'm clear, that making judgment on it, but basically existing classroom furniture, specialized, is being disposed of.
Auction off.
Auction off.
Yes.
Could I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So I think what Mr. Isley is getting at, we've got some furniture that's relatively maybe 5 or 6 years old. And then some furniture that's 20 or 30 years old. Would we get rid of the 20 and 30-year-old furniture first and move the 5 to 6 year furniture and to replace that before we get rid of the 5 to 6 year furniture and hold on to the 30 year?
Absolutely.
So along those lines, I heard that Susan did an evaluation of the existing furniture to see what was usable. But did anybody in-house look at that with her to make that same determination?
When she went around, she was with someone in the house. So that would be.
I'm just a little skeptical having a vendor tell us.
She was with all of the schools. She actually walked through her dispense spaces with all of the teachers as well as the program chairs of those particular programs. And then we did another follow-up after they walked through their own to give their reflection of how the students access the spaces. Related services with some of the chairs in the after that meeting as well. They followed up.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a question. I just want full clarity. The 20 classrooms that we initially had in phase 1, but we're not going to renovate. Is this furniture going to go to those classrooms? Or does that wait till renovation?
That waits until renovation.
Okay. And then as far as the percentage of existing furniture or classrooms that have this kind of ability to write online, I know the business incubator has that. Are there any other classrooms in the school currently that have this kind of advanced furniture?
Yes, so I can speak to that. There are some, a lot of the existing pieces, what they have is an older version of a marker board surface. So this will be an update to some of that existing. It's actually a surface that's not being used that heavily in the industry anymore, and it's going more towards this marker board surface. So I would say just about every department that we talk to has seen and used these spaces in some capacity. And in general, we're all driving towards wanting this for their curriculum and conversations of what was working and why they would like to see it at a larger capacity.
What is the expected life of a desk, for example, that has that whiteboard surface? It seems to me like it might not be particularly durable. Do we have any sense of how long we expect that to last?
Yeah, so actually the warranty on a marker board top is a 3-year, while all other components are a 10-year. It is one of the things that makes the warranty less, but we often hear that that school districts that prefer the marker board top, they're still not disposing at any time before a 10-year limit. I can easily put you guys in touch with other schools that have used it, because the conversation around the marker board top was more beneficial to them than it was without it.
Questions, Ralph, Ralph or Jackie? I don't know. You're the only two who haven't spoken yet.
The question that was asked about who, the input from teachers and staff on needs was something that seemed important to ask. And I'm wondering about, in terms of the life of the furniture, within the last 8 years, and this is when Ron Johnson was here and made presentations and updated some of the furniture with the, modular furniture that could be arranged in various configurations to allow for group work or singular, as opposed to sled desks, which I think we still have quite a few of those as well. So relative to that, was that evaluated in terms of how, beneficial or the right approach in terms of furniture as we're transitioning? And I do understand, new classrooms and trying to be state of the art. But I struggle a bit with this is where it'd be nice to hear from some teachers, the whiteboard tops with a 3-year warranty. When everything else has a 10-year, that's a flag for me. But then again, I'm not in the classroom, so I'm not sure what the input from teachers was on that. I'd be interested to know.
As far as a comprehensive, like across the entire school, I can't claim to speak to that, but I do know I was coming up here a second ago to speak to that same item. There are a number of those that were purchased as part of that was originally a pilot program preceding my arrival in the district. Those are still in use, largely in science classrooms, and then on the third floor in some other classrooms as well. But, yeah, they're still functional. They're still used for instruction on a daily basis, and they still look good. I know that from going through the building as in my role here, but also at parent-teacher conferences. I know I've seen teachers make use of that to kind of demonstrate how they function instructionally. So they're still in good use, the ones that we had as part of that.
And I would just say that's very helpful. And it would be helpful having that type of information as a part of the presentation, so that some things that to my ear sounded new and not quite sure, where we land with that. If it's something that, we've already piloted in a way, and that it is durable past 3 years. I mean, all of those kinds of things within our own district, given the number of students we have, that's helpful in terms of arriving at a decision.
I can also say that some of the special education classrooms that have probably the most intense use have some of these marker board surfaces, and they are holding up past the 3-year mark. So I would say if you're looking for other departments to kind of check in with, special education would be a good one to talk to.
And I appreciate that. And I think that we're backing into this in a way that for those making the presentation, this is the type of information that needs to be brought forward to make an informed decision. But I appreciate that there are other departments. So I've learned some things this evening about that. Thank you.
Just to clarify, so if that marker board surface, it can be replaced, right? You don't have to replace the entire piece of furniture. You can just replace that one component.
Absolutely. Yes. And so not that this is anything that the district want to do, but should at the end of the marker board lifetime, or when you guys are ready to replace, the legs are still able to be reused, and it would just be a top replacement. And it could outlast the life of, 10 years easily.
Other questions? Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you. That concludes the items we have.
Okay, future agenda items. I'd like to suggest future agenda items.
I have one.
Tom?
I would like to, we've had a lot of discussion about having, looking at things through an equity lens in the decision-making process. I would like to see how we look at things through a student lens before we even consider an equity lens. So, student decisions that are being made and how we're making sure that they're student-centric.
So I have a sort of a tandem request for a future agenda item, which will be, I'm sure, the next board basically can certainly better observe. I would like us as a board to incorporate more directly student voice, either by having a student board member that sits on our board or having a superintendent committee that is sort of a shadow student board. Shadow's not the right word, but like an advisory student board. Like, I don't know what it would look like necessarily. But I think that there's a way that we can be a lot more intentional about having students actively participating, not just in our meetings. We have Maeve, she's wonderful, and she updates us on student council. But to have someone who's actually helping us sort of walk through some of these decisions to keep that student voice sort of ever present.
So in the previous slide, we had a student who sat on the board and was a part of the dialogue. So that's doable. But we also have our student leaders advisory group. And the student leaders advisory group meets once a month. When Mr. Washington was on the board previously, and since then he's been a rep there. But they've had voice in the cell phone policy. They've had voice in the racial equity procedures. They've had voice in the incident protocol, in the equity analysis tool, hiring practices. So there is a group that we need to build on what I would say there, because the vast majority of them were seniors. That those, both those things you suggested are quite.
Yeah, and I think what I would like to, perhaps selfishly, is since I'm not a part of any of those groups, right? It would be nice to have them actually in the room as we're talking about some of these items. For example, we're talking about furniture, having a student who's used the furniture come in and talk about it would be super helpful. And so without ruining your bedtime, once or twice a month, I think there's another way to do it.
I agree with, I'm sorry, Sarah, if you're still talking. It's very hard to hear you all, by the way. Sarah, I agree with this idea of the students and hearing from the students. I quite honestly, I believe that Dr. Pruitt-Adams has done an amazing job of including student voice in every single activity that they've done and in every piece of information that has been brought before us. I really do believe that. I've always thought it was a brilliant and fabulous idea to have a student on the board. I don't know how we do that. I don't know what the OMA is on that, but I would love that more than anything. The other piece is I do want to acknowledge that because students have been involved in this, but also educators do have an understanding of what it takes to move students around a classroom. And if conversations have been had with education professionals in the building around some of what this furniture is, I'm confident that those educators know what's required in the ways and the ways that we teach now that are most effective, and that furniture actually accomplishes those goals. I do trust that our administration has vetted what that is with them, and I feel with the students as well as with the staff, because those pieces are so integral. And being an educator and having used some of the equipment that they've actually shown us, I can attest to what a difference it makes. Having some of those pieces that I can see that I've used in different work environments, and how easy it is for us to transition to circle first and foremost, because I'm thinking about circle. But as well as like the academic pieces of being able to students to group heterogeneously, homogeneously, all of the ways that we know work to be able to move students around to get the so that they have the best possible experience in the classroom. That equipment that we're looking at, all that furniture, really does address those needs in a really significant way. I'm actually very pleased with what has been brought forward.
All right, anybody else? I move to adjourn.
Second.
Committee of the whole. There's a second from Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so we have still, of course, our special board meeting. So my suggestion for folks is this. We have closed session first, of course, then we have a relatively long list of action items, which is not typical for us. So my thought is, why don't we go ahead and convene that right now, and then the break as we're moving into the closed session, take a 5-minute break and then meet, or actually those of us who are physically present are going to go into the Student Activity Center. To that end, I'd like to call to order the April 8th, 2021 special board meeting at 8:51 p.m. Gail, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Kovsky,
Here.
Dr. Moore,
Here.
Mr. Barron,
Here.
Mr. Isley,
Here.
Mr. Martieri,
Here.
Ms. Harris. Dixon Spivey.
Here.
Ms. Harris.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, now I move that we enter closed session for the purpose of discussing appointments, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district, the legal counsel for the district, and independent contractors and specific volunteers, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. Is there a second?
Second.
Gail, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
Mr. Isley,
Yeah.
Mr. Martieri,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Kovsky,
Yes.
and Ms. Dixon Spivey.
Yes, so board members and administrators who are going to be participating in that, I suggest that we start up again at 9 o'clock. The link for closed session is in your email, but that'll give us time to move and people to stretch their legs a little. Thanks.
It feels so good.
Well, at least it's quicker for us to get over here.
We're
Hey,
the
Gina?
winners.
Hey, Gina,
Yeah.
you know, I'm working on a major piece of federal legislation with Robin Kelly that would get the feds to invest a ton more money into what's called targeted schools. Those are 75% or less of their adequacy target, 20% or more low income, 20% or more racial minority, 20% or more EL, meeting any of those tests. I'd like to chat with you about that because we might get some traction on this bill. And I'm going to talk with Audrey Seglin about possibly getting the NEA and the AFT behind it too.
Would love to talk about it.
Rainbow Push looks like they're going to endorse it. We talked with them today.
Awesome. There's so much targeted work needed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And this would create 3 new funding tranches for the federal government that are in addition to everything that's out there. So it supplements and it's in addition to, it replaces nothing, which would allow direct investments in these communities, in these schools that have been underinvested in for generations.
Yeah. We don't sometimes, I think when I talk to my colleagues in other districts across the state and across the country, like even locally, like not far from us, we don't recognize sometimes how resourced we are and how under-resourced other places are.
It's so true, Gina. You know, I'm in River Forest, right? I take one step out of River Forest and I'm in Maywood, Bellwood, or Austin. A lot different communities than River Forest from a capacity standpoint.
I actually had a colleague tell me that she didn't have any, what was it? There's some common thing that they didn't have, not just nurses, but there was another very common thing that they did not have in their school. Like, oh, well, we don't have that. I was like, wow.
It's amazing. And if you've been, I don't know if you've visited like some of the schools in East St. Louis or Marion, what they don't have, oh my goodness, right? I've seen textbooks held together with duct tape. Yeah. The things you see.
Sarah, we were just saying that the Zoomers were here and we were just waiting for the roomers to arrive.
Yeah. All right, Chris, let me know when we're ready to tell me live again. All right, Gail, do we have any public comments?
No.
No public comments, okay, thank you. We do have action items this evening. Our first action item is policies for second reading and amendments. I move to approve the policies as presented. Second reading and adoption or amendment. It's policy 4:182 face coverings, 2:240 board policy on development, 4:10 fiscal and business management, 4:60 purchases and contracts, and 6:15 school accountability. Is there any discussion by the board? Questions or comments?
No, I sent some typo clarifications, cleanups to Gail, but those are just cleanup.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Anything substantive? All right, Governor, please call the roll.
Mr. Isley?
Yes.
Mr. Bartieri?
Yep.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Chakowski?
Yes.
Jim Moore?
Is that me?
Yes.
Yes, I couldn't hear, sorry. Yes.
Mr. Barron?
Did we get a second on this before? Did we get a second or no? My answer is yes, but,
Tom seconded.
okay, all right, good. Okay, second.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes, thank you. All right, our next item is an intergovernmental agreement between the Park District of Oak Brook and us. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the advised intergovernmental agreement between the Park Districts and effective May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2026. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Right. Dr. Fernandez, I believe we have some.
Yes, this is an agreement that the district has had with the Park District now for over 10 years, and it's really about utilization and sharing of facilities. We sit. Sorry. Siri thought I was talking to her. We normally, myself and Dan Arnold, sit down and review this annually. This year, Mr. Anderson, Ms. Sador, myself reviewed, as did Dan Arnold and Fred Cruz from the B&G. The only addition we're asking is the language that is in the last sentence of section JAJII, and that is the only exception would be that the district shall pay $1 per hour usage fee for maintenance of Ridgeland Fields and the ice rink. And we would ask the board to approve this item so that it would go into effect May 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2026. And it is in compliance with strategic plan priorities 1, 2, 3, and 4, and district policy 120.
Any questions by board members? Yeah, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Martyri?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Kowski?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Mr. Eisner?
Yes.
Ms. Dixon Spivey? Passes.
The next item is the, oh, I'm sorry.
It's a resolution authorizing dismissal and non-employment. Sorry, it's a good item.
I'm really struggling to hear. If Sarah, if you're talking, it's really hard to hear you.
Is that any better?
Ah, yeah.
All right, I move to approve Reimagined Education and in-person learning plan for implementation the week of April 12th, 2021. Is there a second? Okay, I believe there's a presentation. Thank you.
Yes, and we also have zooming in Mike Curio, so if you have any questions regarding the work he's helped us do with the live screening. So I will kick this off. The item is coming forward. On February of 2021, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, released updated guidance for operating schools and the operational strategies for K-12 institutions who are phased in mitigation. According to the CDC, K-12 school districts should be the last setting to close. As a result of the CDC updates, ISB, which is the Illinois State Board of Education, and the Illinois Department of Public Health have revised the public health requirements for schools that is associated with guidance and these guidelines. The updated joint guidance was released in March, and it prevails in the event that there is any conflict with the guidance that was previously issued by ISB. And so what we're presenting to you today is our plan to bring more students into the building. One key piece to note is that the social distance requirement was reduced from 6 feet down to 3 feet. And that we still have to adhere with the several levels of mitigation that were in place. So on this slide, we will start with, on February 1st, at the start of the second semester, we launched on hybrid learning plan. At that time, we had 1,926 students opt in for on-site classes, which resulted in 4 cohorts, and that was based upon the 6-foot social distancing in classrooms that caused that. Each cohort had an opportunity to rotate through the building for 2 days of in-person, followed by 6 days of remote learning. In early March, as I indicated, ISB and IDPH issued new joint guidance, mandating that schools prioritize the return to in-person instruction. However, it is important to note that this return was not to the pre-pandemic conditions. Guidance made clear that mitigation measures, including masking, social distancing, and enhanced cleaning protocols must still be followed. There was, however, significant change in the guidance to social distancing, while noting that 6 feet of social distancing is still the safest point of guidance for schools to follow. The 3 feet for students and vaccinated teachers was put into place. These new guidelines allow us to reevaluate and increase capacity of each of our classrooms. We offered our families another opportunity to change their students' persons for remote status. As you can see in our slide, we have an additional 120 families opting.
Okay, so since launching in February, we've seen in-person attendance decline to the point where roughly about half of our hybrid students were actually choosing to continue to learn. So few days in the building and so few students actually present in the on-site classes. Many students felt that attending in person. So by going down to 2 cohorts instead of the 4 we've had up until this point, students will be able to participate in on-site classes twice as often as we had school year. They can be in the building for classes at least 2 periods, at least 2 days a week, and sometimes 3. Very hopeful that this increase in in-person time will boost on-site attendance for our hybrid students. While maintaining, you can see in this next slide, our current A-Day, B-Day schedule. Our daily bell schedule will be intact throughout the end of this school year. We did consider switching to a normal 8-period schedule, but that would have kept students in the building for lunch, and there was still the 6-foot distancing requirement in place for lunch, which made it almost impossible to pull off with the space that we have, particularly with the increase in kids. Given that the South Cafeteria is under construction for 2022, it could have actually stressed on that as well.
Another change to our plan is we realized that we needed to revise our saliva screening schedule. And so we will still continue weekly testing for each student on site, but there'll be a consistent day tied to the alphabet. And so you may have A through L on Monday and Tuesday drop-off. Staff will maintain a Wednesday drop-off, and then you'll have not cohort 2, from M through Z that will drop off on Thursdays and Fridays. Students in athletics will have a consistent day as well for those who remain remote. So there's no separate testing days for different students as it was before. And there will be no weekend drop-offs, which will allow us to have a wide window of coverage for our students with the screen. Next slide.
We are maintaining the same street protocols that we've had in place since we launched Trident. To accommodate the increased number of students on campus each day, we're adding another door for them to enter. We're also increasing the presence of campus safety staff.
It's hard to hear. I'm sorry. It's very hard to hear.
Checking 1, 2. Can you check this? Testing 1, 2.
That's much better.
We're increasing the number of campus and security staff at the doors in order to accommodate the increased number of students coming in. And also we're adding another door for them to enter. In addition, at the beginning of the increased capacity, it's an all hands on deck situation for technology staff who will be available to work in concert with campus security.
So with the cleaning and disinfecting protocols, we will continue to follow our cleaning and disinfecting protocols. BNG uses the Nemesis disinfectant, which is the EPA Tier 1. That is for fighting COVID-19 and it's ready to kill the coronavirus in 1 minute. In the classrooms, BNG supply the cleaning supplies, which include hydrochlorous, which is an HOCI disinfectant. The teachers use it and the students use it as well. And it's highly effective to eliminate germs bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other pathogens, including COVID-19 virus.
I'm sorry.
Say again. Since launching the hybrid learning in February, we've experienced low risk of the transmission of COVID-19 throughout the building. We continue to be vigilant about maintaining our protocols so that students and employees have a safe and healthy learning environment and experience for the remainder of the school year.
I do want to add that I misquoted on the saliva screening dates for the M through Z. Those students are Wednesday and Thursday. I said Thursday, Friday. The other thing I want to note is today we sent to parents the link that they can go in and check to see what cohort their students are in. They will be able to also, for those who have not been on site and picked up a kit before they had the saliva kit, they have directions on how to go in and register their student for the saliva testing and the time frame as to which each student can pick up their saliva kits should they need them. I do want to say that we've had a lot of questions from parents also about staff that is referring to the project. We have a total of 35, of which I believe 25 are classrooms. And we would ask the board to approve this plan tonight so that we can get our kids.
Wonderful. Any questions from board members? Right?
So a couple of things just for information that saliva screening considers anything to test or evaluate the efficacy of that process.
We've had constant conversation with the industry. Our legal counsel has looked into it. Right now, we've had every case except for maybe one or two that have come in where they told us the person needs to go and get a clear test. Because this is a surveillance. It does not determine if they have it or not, but it has been most effective. So we have no concerns at this point about the efficacy of it. We do realize there's been some misinformation in the press that has been cleared up, and Safeguard has all of their appropriate documentation.
Thank you. Second question. I just wanted to clarify, is the lunch capacity really the only thing keeping us from one cohort, or are there others?
Well, lunch capacity is a part of it. It's a significant part of it. As well. But we also have a pattern of student supports that are running throughout the second half of the day right now, and they become part of how we function. So it would be a disruption to those types of supports. It's something that we can overcome, right? That were our own barrier, but it certainly is a barrier. There's also these are down the order and ranking order. There's also a concern of how we can reasonably pivot kind of on a curricular basis, right? At this point in the year, with 1 month plus to go for our classes, if we were suddenly to make a significant change in how instruction is done. We do it because we did it in March 13th, a year ago. But those are all factors to go in. Certainly the lunch is and I know the schools are struggling with that across the West Suburban Conference area.
I do want to, if I might go back to this, Mr. Isley, if I might, about 2 cohorts. There's also a capacity issue. And when we tried to do 1 cohort, there was approximately 116 classroom inaccuracies. Chris, do you want to speak to that?
Right, it was 118 classrooms that were overcapacitized. I don't remember that exact number, but it was I believe it was close to 350 instances, periods, courses that were over capacity for where they were placed. When we were running it as 2 cohorts, that was eliminated from the equation. through the consultant that we used to evaluate how many we could get into a classroom, what's the best cohort assignment.
Could you speak?
Could I clarify? That is a distinction. What we're talking about right now are the barriers in place to do one cohort. All 2,000 some kids in the building are still on the AB schedule. I think your question was specific to doing 1 through 8 of our classes in one A. Right. And so both those things are barriers. But
I thought his question was why we couldn't have 2 cohorts.
Right, and I know you supplied a lot of this information. I just wanted to be really clear, you know, that we've looked at it very hard. And yes, this is the best solution. Thank you.
Just a comment, right into the question, if that's all right. What we saw in the last few months was a negative spiral. Not enough students were coming, and therefore the ones that were coming were discouraged to come, and it created an even more vicious cycle where students were like, what's the point of this? Now that we have double or probably triple in real numbers, or we had to come like quadruple, is there any kind of, I'm just concerned that it might repeat again in some way, because students have taken to like enjoying staying at home sometimes, there's convenience to that. Do we have any mechanism to say, hey, if you don't start coming in by May 1, right? I'm just wondering, based on the window we have, if there's any kind of way to, because I'm just trying to have it be as efficient and as effective as possible within reason.
So I'm going to respond to that in 2 ways. Okay. First, let's just talk about this called a spiral, this kind of downward slide that we saw with the attendance rates. If you had asked, you know, that question, I would have been able, many of us would have been able to predict that that was what might happen here, because we've heard other school districts talk about that. The curriculum directors group that some of my team members are part of, Western River Conference principals, all are describing kind of a similar trend. You start hybrid, you're not having a large number of students there, you have this atrophy going on. You would have predicted this. If I use that same kind of measure for this type of in-house, we don't see that same atrophy. So students are coming because what it feels a little bit more like school. One of the things that initially struck me, just on a quick anecdotal point, is as we were going around, actually the 3 of us, sometime earlier this week, taking a look at some of the rooms to see, okay, how can we make this room work, or can it work? We have to move this classroom because the capacity is too high. When we were looking at the desks, we're like, wow, this looks like regular learning. And if you think about a 3-foot distance between desks, that's pretty close to what a regular classroom looks like. So it will have that feel for our kids, and had that effect on me just kind of visually coming in. And I think that'll help to stave off the atrophy of attendance. I think the other thing, I don't want to, well, I do actually. Pivoting to a different type of learning for a different system of hybrid learning at this point after this is not likely. So there's very little incentive to try to go to families and say, hey, you know, if you're not going to come, don't come, because we want to reserve that space for other kids so we can change our model. That's not possible. There's just not enough space for us to retool. So I don't see that happening, but I do think it will happen.
That's required 3 foot span. It would stay.
Yes. It's not exactly right. I mean, but it's close. Obviously, our classrooms are, you know, low 20s. It's kind of a common thing we see for capacity.
Thank you. Ralph, Gina, or Jackie, do you have any questions?
I just want to say it's very hard to hear the board members, but I can hear Greg just fine. I want to make a comment, not necessarily a question, that we're still in a pandemic. And although I understand there is a real desire for us to get back to normal life or regular life, I still will be a no for this, because I do not feel that it is in the safety of our students and their families and all of our community yet to have 2,000 students in the building. And even though I know we're doing the cohort business, I just feel that I know that there's evidence and data, but what I've seen from colleagues in other parts of the state and in other parts of the country is as soon as we go back in this way, then the numbers start to spiral up again. There was just a report today from Pritzker that the cases have gone up in Cook County. So I know that we're all very much in a hurry to get things back to normal for people, but normal is not going to be it's still not going to be like thank you, Greg, for saying that because we're doing 3 feet apart now, there's going to be some semblance of what school felt like before. But I honestly, I think that this is not in the best interest or the health or the well-being of our students. Also, I'm highly concerned about the social emotional aspect of returning into a building amidst a pandemic with numbers rising and the emotional toll of that for not only the students, but the staff. So I just wanted to make sure I voiced that and put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Round for Jackie.
I don't have any additional comments. I share the concerns that Gina expressed, and I believe that those comments of mine have been consistent across this process.
Thank you. Ralph? Mikhail, could you please call the roll?
Yeah.
Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Mr. Martieri?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
No.
Mr. Kopsky?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
No.
Ms. Dixon Spivey?
Yes. Next action item. I move to approve the resolution authorizing dismissal and non-reappointment of probationary part-time teachers. Is there a second?
Second.
Gail, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Martieri?
Yes.
Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Mr. Isley?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Kopsky?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Dixon Spivey?
Yes. Okay. I move to approve the resolution authorizing dismissal of non-reappointment second-year probationary teachers. Is there a second?
Second.
Gail, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Mr. Isley?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Kopsky?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Martieri?
Yes.
Ms. Dixon Spivey?
Yes. Thank you. And we have F. Are we doing F? Because there's nothing written under it. Okay. So I move to approve personnel recommendations. Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Isley?
Yes.
Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Martieri?
Yes.
Mr. Kopsky?
Yes.
And Dr. Ms. Dixon Spivey?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn and go to Chipotle.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, guys. Good night.
Good night.
Well done.